I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Relationships and self-love, and surprise, it's our first bonus episode. Hope everyone is doing great. Things are really moving over here. I got vaccinated last week and also found a new apartment, so really living up to my New Year's word, that is movement in all the ways, movement in the podcast and making big changes in the career sphere and pretty much every area of my life, which is what I had wanted to do, so that feels pretty good. Speaking of the podcast, just going to be a really quick intro this week. I wanted to talk about why I'm doing this bonus episode. So I have a lot of content. I have been working my ass off for the last few months, just having conversations with people, recording. It's been really awesome getting to talk to so many amazing people about a variety of different topics. And I can't wait for you to hear what I've learned and learn from these people as well. That being said, I have such a large backlog that there's some episodes that are a little more timely, and this is one of them. So you're about to hear a conversation that I had with actually a friend of mine from college, Allison, and she has this really cool online presence where she talks about a number of her diagnoses, including Pmdd, endometriosis, pelvic floor tension, and PTSD. And she's an amazing human. We actually dated a set of roommates back in college. So, you know, we're kind of running in the same circle, but really I hadn't talked to her in years. So, you know, when the time came, I knew that she was somebody that I wanted to talk to. And the reason that this is timely is because April is PMDD Awareness Month. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. You know, and there will be episodes about both of these topics going forward for sure. But, you know, this felt timely. It felt important. I learned so much. And I've been telling people that even if they do not have a vagina, that it's really a good episode to listen to. I've learned so much about how the menstrual cycles work and how they relate to your mood. And, you know, I say this in the episode, but I myself was diagnosed with PMDD a couple months ago. And it was kind of something that my doctor brushed past. She was just like, oh, what we do with people who have PMDD. And I was like, wait, what is that? So this really was kind of my intro to it. It was really incredible to catch up with Allison. This episode's a little bit longer than our normal episodes, but you know what? That's why we're doing bonus episodes. So I hope you enjoy this conversation that I have with Allison. She is a gem of a human. It was so good to talk to her and catch up and hear what she's been up to and just hear her story and learn from her. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation and be well.
Do you find yourself struggling between the choices of playing the latest video games you got for Christmas or debating Aunt Fanny about religion over Christmas dinner?
Do you find yourself trying to work video games into your school papers, Sunday sermon, or next book proposal?
Do you wish you had more people to argue with about the hidden philosophical meaning of your favorite RPG?
Well then, nerds, we are the podcast for you.
No Avatars Allowed is a podcast about video games, theology, and all things cultural and intellectual.
Oh, and we talk about sex a lot, too.
Our hosts Rachel Dalton, Ben Wallace, and Joshua Wise figure out each week how on earth to cram video games into some kind of bigger discussion.
And mostly, we make it work.
Check us out every Saturday morning on allportsopen.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So grab your controller, that unused copy of Thomas Aquinas that's sitting on your shelf, and maybe a negligee, and come join us for what is certain to be an interesting and strange conversation on No Avatars Allowed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am super excited for my conversation today. I am here with a friend of mine from college, and this is the first time we're touching base in like years. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was actually thinking about it last night. I was like, when is actually like the last time I really remember like seeing Rachel? And honestly, our college boyfriends lived together at one point. And I just remember at one point us waking up in the morning and like looking at each other and just being like, ready to go to school? Like, like, oh God, I can't believe those were our college relationships. But, you know, we live and we learn, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, I don't know how like your relationship ended with that particular person. Mine was not great.
It was not phenomenal. I'll let you know.
But live and learn. So,
but I literally was like, oh, like we literally just like slept on opposite sides of a wall for like months.
Oh gosh, yeah. You learn. We learn.
We learn. We grow. We were so young. Yeah. We were babies.
Exactly, and we're both doing much better now. Doing different things. We caught up a little bit. You're still in Michigan, correct?
I am.
And how's the mitten doing these days?
It's Michigan. It doesn't know what it is or what it wants, but it's here.
Yeah, that's kind of par for the course.
Yeah.
So when I started this venture, kind of becoming a solo podcaster, I actually had a co-host for a while.
Yeah, I was listening.
To start. Yeah. When I started this out, one of the first people that I thought about reaching out to was you, because you have this amazing online presence. So let's kind of just start with that. Tell me about like how that started.
Oh gosh. It's actually really interesting because I don't think it was even a conscious choice when I changed my personal Instagram handle from like my name over to My Peculiar Pelvis. Mm-hmm. It was just like I had reached a point where I was like, oh my God, no, like this is who I am. How can I exist in any space if I don't acknowledge this?
Right.
So I just like completely couldn't hide it anymore. I needed to be able to live my truth. So I just did it. And it was actually really interesting because I don't think I consciously realized that I was like posting pictures of myself not wearing pants and talking about my mental health until a couple months later. And I started really making new connections and like having people message me and tell me that they related and they were so glad that I had put words to how they had felt. And it moved me. And it made me feel not alone for the first time in a very long time. And it gave me some sense of purpose, which I was missing. And I ran with it. So, and now I don't have to wear pants nearly as much. So it saves on laundry. It's great.
The pantsless pictures are a reality 24/7 now, it feels
Absolutely.
like.
I mean, and it was funny because like I was doing it way before COVID, but now it's like, cool. And now I wanted to be like, welcome to my world, everybody. How's it feel?
It's freeing. I can tell you that. Yeah. I'm recording from bed right now. I always record from bed, just because I'm a lazy piece of shit. And also a Taurus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but okay. So you switched your Instagram over, and I remember when you did it because I was like, that's an interesting handle name. Like, let's go check that out and see what that's about. And then I did a little bit of stalking, and it says at the top of your profile what we're going to talk about today, which is you have a number of diagnoses that have really impacted your life, including endometriosis, Pmdd, and pelvic floor tension.
Yes.
Do you want to walk me through like what each of those things are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll start with endometriosis. Endometriosis is when tissue similar but not the same as the lining of your uterus grows in other places that it's not supposed to. And endometriosis has been found in literally almost every organ of the body. So it is a whole body disease. It's not just, a uterus thing that a lot of people think it is. It's not just a heavy period. It's an entire gambit of gastrointestinal, bladder issues, rectal issues, mental health issues. And it revolves around your cycle and how that tissue growing in odd parts of our bodies reacts to the different times of our cycle. So as much as people think it's just about the period, there's a whole 4-phase situation that we go through every month that disease reacts and responds to, that you kind of have to learn how to ebb and flow with. Because the thing is, there's still no known cause or cure. So it's very much something you have to cope with at this point. And that's not something I say lightly, because it's completely life-changing. Whether or not at one point they categorized endometriosis by stage, which is not really useful anymore. But no matter what stage endometriosis you have or where it's located in your body, it affects everything. So it's something you just have to learn. And everyone's endometriosis is so unique, which is the funny thing, and it's the tricky thing that has made it so hard for people to navigate finding that diagnosis, because it presents itself differently in everyone, because it grows in different places. So it's not like a doctor can just say, okay, ABC, endometriosis, got it. It's something that honestly still at this point takes 8 to 10 years on average for someone to get a diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's sad, because all of the things you have to go through to get to that point are debilitating. Like they build up and they chip off at your self-esteem and your health and your well-being. So I hope we get to a better point with endometriosis where it doesn't take that long. So I guess that's endometriosis in a very small package.
Nutshell, yeah.
Very small package. And then where should I go with it? PMDD. So PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, is a severe cyclical hormonal-based mood disorder. And this happens during the second half of our cycle, generally triggered towards the end of ovulation and going into week 4, the luteal phase of our cycle. And the thing that's very commonly misunderstood about PMDD is that either it's lumped in with PMS,
right,
which is PMS is a completely valid thing that people go through, but PMDD is a completely different thing in and of itself. It's a completely different monster. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that PMDD, it alters everything about you. It can have a myriad of symptoms. It starts with irritability and, discomfort, and a lot of people with PMDD get categorized as hypersensitive. I was personally my whole life. I was just, you're very sensitive, you're going through that time where you just can't handle a lot, and that's just, it wasn't very fair to put me in that box. Or the thing that's unfortunate with PMDD is it can also very, very commonly be misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder.
Interesting. I did not know that. I actually, I haven't told you that. I haven't told you this because I knew it would come up, but I was diagnosed with PMDD a couple months ago.
Oh, well, welcome. It's a shitty club to be a part of, but the people are pretty nice. So, I mean, I'm sending you a hug. Yeah. I'm sorry. It sucks, but happy to have a friend.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm just like, oh, why does everything bother me? I'm, trying to figure out a different range of medications to kind of ease the moment.
Yeah,
but
anyway. It's a whole thing that it's still taken me. I mean, I think I really started taking my PMDD diagnosis very seriously because it got very severe. I'm going to say about 2 or 3 years ago. And I still have to make adjustments to my treatment. Mm-hmm. So it's an ever-going thing. And it's, again, one of those things that doesn't have a known cause or cure. But back to the whole commonly getting misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, the thing that's really interesting that I have found out lately is that 30% more women get diagnosed with bipolar disorder than men. Which I find very interesting. Because 1 in 20 women get diagnosed with PMDD. And the funny statistic is about 30% of women with PMDD get misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder first. So I have a feeling a lot of people who are assigned female at birth may be diagnosed with bipolar disorder and living with bipolar disorder when they may actually have PMDD.
That is really interesting.
Because no one has stepped back and said, oh, there's a hormonal factor here. And that's mind-blowing to me. But I really hope that we can start making those steps there. Because getting that diagnosis, as much as it doesn't fix anything, it can open up a toolbox. And once you realize that it is linked with your cycle, I feel like it gives you such an empowerment to know that you can kind of track it and you can start to learn it and try to, it's never going to be your friend necessarily, but you can kind of learn to work with it. And if you don't realize you have that cycle and that it works in that pattern, it's very confusing. I mean, it's already confusing when so that's just a really interesting thing about PMDD that I'm currently very fired up about.
Yeah, I feel like I need to research that.
Yeah. And the thing with PMDD is there's so many non-catch-all treatments that people are being thrown because there's not much known about it yet. They are still working on it. They recently just had to scrap the first medication that they started to make for PMDD specifically because it didn't work. But they're just starting to do that. So at this point, we're still having to learn how to manage with, lifestyle changes, therapy, possibly birth control, possibly SSRIs. And then the thing is, if those don't work, the next line of treatment, the last resource when you are trying to handle PMDD, if it gets severe enough, is a hysterectomy with a bilateral oophorectomy.
I knew you were going to say it, and I was really hoping you weren't going to say it.
I know, and I'm really sorry. I hope I'm not triggering you at all, because it's very funny because a lot of people will think a hysterectomy is a cure for endometriosis, and I'll be like, it's not. Please don't tell me to get a hysterectomy for my endometriosis. But at the same time, I can't deny that a hysterectomy with a bilateral oophorectomy, which means also getting the ovaries, might be something in my future, but not because of my endo, but because of my PMDD. And it's not that we have a hormonal imbalance. And that is something that gets so misconstrued with PMDD, because people will go and get hormonal tests and their tests will come back normal. And they'll be like, I don't feel normal. And it's not because our hormones are imbalanced, but it's because of how our brain reacts to the normal fluctuation of the hormones. And it can wreak havoc on our brains if you have PMDD. I mean, you end up dealing with body dysmorphia, nausea. I mean, it's like PMS, but you put it on steroids and you give it crack and you give it Four Loko at the same time, you know? And unfortunately, I believe what is the statistic? I want to say 30% of individuals with PMDD will attempt, I'm not saying successfully, but they will attempt suicide at one point in their life because of how intense that reaction.
Wow.
And it's such a storm because as those hormones build leading up to menstruation, our brains just are responding to that reaction, and our body is thinking it's doing the right thing. Our brain is thinking it's doing the right thing, but we are not okay.
Right.
And then we get our periods. And all of a sudden, clarity starts to come back.
That's exactly what it feels like.
You know? And it's like...
It's like the snake shedding its skin. That's the analogy I told my boyfriend.
Exactly. I literally, every time I walk out of the bathroom, once I bleed, I feel like I'm looking at the world with actually different eyes.
Yeah.
And I literally have to like spend time grieving like how everything went down when I like literally wasn't the same person.
Right.
So it's just a very interesting thing, PMDD. I'll tell you.
Yeah. It's just another lovely thing about having a vagina. I guess,
right? Yeah. Yeah. And then pelvic floor tension. So there's like this umbrella of pelvic floor disorders. And pelvic floor tension is under there. And mine specifically, I believe it is called levator ani myalgia. And my doctor explained it to me this way. If you were to break your arm in some traumatic way, and then from then on out, every time your arm got hit, but not broken, but like just like hit a corner of a table or someone grabbed it really tight, your brain responded as if it was broken again.
Mm-hmm.
So not everyone with pelvic floor tension really has this same background. There are many causes for pelvic floor tension, but mine specifically, unfortunately, has to do with sexual assault trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So my pelvis in all its glory, because I do love my pelvis, it's trying to protect me.
Yeah.
But I have essentially, if you were to put yourself in a super Kegel and like lock your knees and lock your abs and clench your butt,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I live. Like if you had a radio and like my pelvis was the radio and the activation of my muscles were the volume, I live on the max volume unintentionally.
Right.
Like completely subconsciously, I am just clenched, trying to be safe. And it has an effect on your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Because the specific muscle, the levator ani, it's like this hammock that stretches from the front of your abdomen down in between your legs and up into the small of your back. And it just keeps all of your pelvic muscles in that nice little, bowl that we like to keep our pelvis, comfy. So if you imagine that, and then that bowl continues to shrink and like contract around the stuff inside it, your pelvis isn't that comfy.
Yeah, that's a no bueno.
So I deal with rectal spasms, vaginal spasms, ureter spasms, clitoral spasms, because that levator ani myalgia, that the levator ani muscle goes across all of them. I mean, I even get abdominal spasms and back spasms. It's just all of it. And the thing that's like unfortunate is it's just trying to keep me safe.
Yeah.
But at this point, I still have to do so much work with my nervous system, because even like a loud car down the street will have me totally locked up and spazzing for like 2 hours. You know, it just like took me by surprise, and my nervous system spiked, and then my pelvis freaked the fuck out. And it's still a lot of work. It's kind of a lifelong thing, but it's that relationship between my muscles being hypertense because they're hyper aware and they're trying to keep me safe, and trying to learn that I am safe and like reprogram that. So that's kind of what my pelvic floor tension is.
Yeah, that's there's not even really a word. Like, it's, I mean, you say unfortunate, and that seems like, you know, the right word, because you could use a lot of more devastating words, but like, it's also your reality. So
yeah. Well, and the thing that's so funny is I look back now, because, you know, we both went to school for musical theater. So singing was such a huge part of my life. And I look back now at like, your pelvis is such a huge part of singing. All of those muscles, engaging those muscles. And I unfortunately have 2 sexual assault traumas, and I feel like I've actually lived with pelvic floor tension my whole life, because my first sexual assault was when I was 5. And so I think my body learned muscle memory incorrectly and learned to rely on my pelvis being hypertense throughout my whole life. So once I started singing, I actually learned how to sing incorrectly. And how I incorporate my pelvis when I sing is actually completely reverse what it should be. So I remember how we used to be like yelled at to like, you know, use your vagina, you know, when
sing from your coochie.
Yeah, sing from your coochie. And I didn't realize that meant to like bear down and to ground yourself. I thought that meant to clench tighter. And so now I'm at this point where my tension has gotten so big and so damaging that I can't even sing. And like, that's so sad.
Yeah. Because it's such an emotional release.
And I think that is exactly. And I think that is not just coincidence. Like, I think the fact that like singing creates such an emotional response, and the fact that it also creates such a physical response within my pelvis, I think that's something.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. It seems like something to explore. And
yeah, like when I get emotional, my pelvis responds.
Yeah,
you know, it's kind of at this point, it's a very fun barometer of how I feel in a room or with a person or in a situation. At this point, I can kind of tell, like, okay, subconsciously, I must not feel as safe as I think I do right now, or I'm not as confident as I'm acting, or this person doesn't feel comfortable to me because suddenly my pelvis is mad. Some part of me doesn't feel safe. Wow. Interesting.
That is it feels weird, I guess, to call it like a gift, but it's an interesting part of it is that, you know, you deal with all of these things and you also have this like little, like, I always say, like, your gut always knows, your body always knows, right?
Your body tells you so much.
Exactly. Like, you have this like natural, like built-in, I mean, everybody does, but it just seems like yours is more.
It's hypersensitive. Yeah.
Just to be able to tell like what's going on, what you think of a person, what your gut reaction is.
Yeah. Because the thing is, like, the way my pelvis will respond and when it contracts, like, when you think about how you have your uterus in front, your bladder in front of your uterus, and then you have your rectum. Like they're literally all kind of in a line in your pelvis. And then you have that levator ani muscle keeping them in place. And when it gets tight around them, like I literally will have to pee my pants because there's no space for my bladder anymore. I mean, granted, I don't pee my pants, but I like have to go to the bathroom like every freaking 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel safe, I mean, cut that down to every 5 minutes.
Right. It's like having a UTI almost.
Honestly, and that's something that a lot of people with pelvic floor tension will, honestly, that's how they lead to that diagnosis. They'll feel like they have a UTI all the time. And honestly, we'll get to it, but after sex and stuff, sometimes that is a response that not an actual UTI, but my muscles will be so flustered that my bladder is like, I don't know what just happened. And it feels like I have a UTI for like a long time.
Yeah, well, let's jump into that. Like, what do you do? How does this impact dating and sex? And I just saw that you posted something, maybe it was yesterday or a couple days ago, about just how you approach talking to people about this when you're dating.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Honestly, it's still something I'm very new and learning. I'm very new at, and I'm still figuring out, because in the beginning of finally getting all of these answers and these diagnoses, I was in a relationship. I was in a long-term relationship. We were together for 6 years total. And I think at the point where I was starting to really get my answers, we were together for 3 or 4 years at that point. And it's just very interesting how chronic health can really impact a relationship. Because there was nothing wrong with him. He was a very nice guy. Honestly, if anything, he had issues with being too empathetic sometimes. Where, if anything, he didn't know what to do because he was just so scared of causing more of a problem.
Right.
So, if anything, when I was actually in that relationship and it started... Because... how do I explain this? Because I like sex. And the thing that's funny is, like, I never complained about sex being a problem. But it slowly started becoming a problem.
Sure.
You know? And I don't know if it was... To me, once I had those answers... And I don't know if this is necessarily a healthy point of view to have, but this is where I feel, this is where I land on it at the current point I'm at in my life. If I'm going to be in chronic pain, I'm going to get some. Okay? Because, like, I'm going to be in pain either way. Like, trust me, I could have had a flare-up if I had, gone to the gym, or I could have had a flare-up if I had some orgasms.
Right. Right.
I'm going to choose the orgasms. Like, it's not necessarily like I'm okay with it in a way, but he was very scared of it. So it got to a point where our sex life didn't exist because it was just this unspoken intimidation factor.
Sure. For both of you, I'm sure.
Yes and no. I really wanted to explore it. I really wanted to have these conversations because once I felt like I had the answers, there's so much on the internet. Like I would Google, and like I had found Lara Parker is one of my favorite Instagram people. She's an editor for BuzzFeed, and she has her own book, and she also has endometriosis, and she talks about owning your sexuality along with having chronic pain. And she was really inspirational to me, that it didn't have to stop you. And if anything, when I was in pain, I wanted to feel sexy, to almost say like, fuck you to my pain.
Yep, absolutely.
And I don't know if that's how everyone responds, but, if my pain got bad if anything, I almost wanted to rebel against it and be like, no, I'm a sexy bitch. Fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
It's my body, you know? So that's like this whole thing I've had to kind of go through. And the pain didn't really faze me because it made me feel powerful to still be able to have sex. You know, even if I was in pain, I had owned my body, you know, in some weird way. So that's how I wanted to approach our sex life. And again, I don't want to make anyone sound bad, but he was so intimidated by my pain that he completely forgot to acknowledge pleasure. So sex became very like, all right, I just want to do this really quick. I don't want to upset anything. Let's just do it really fast. And then we don't have to talk about it. And like, it was just a very non-personal thing at one point. And
Yeah.
I remember like trying to like, I wanted to like put our like craziest fantasies down on pieces of paper and pick them out of a hat and like have a crazy sex day in our house. And like he just looked at me and laughed and shook his head and like walked out of the room.
Mm.
And like I was like, I am trying so hard.
Yeah.
Like I haven't even said I don't want to have sex. But the fact that I have these things that title that sex might be painful for me or might end in pain is so intimidating to my partner that he won't touch me.
That's really upsetting.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't blame him. You know, I don't feel men necessarily got the best sexual education in our generation. But he was very not open to other ideas of pleasure. You know, it was very like, sex is this one thing.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, then we just don't do sex. It's like, well, that's a little boring, don't you think?
Yeah. Sex is a buffet.
You know, like that's bullshit. Like, I want everything to make me feel sexy. I'm sorry. But yeah. So I should also acknowledge that with pelvic floor tension, I may not have ever said that I didn't want to have sex. But there were times my body did.
Sure. Like just push
straight up.
You're not allowed.
Straight up, my vagina would get so tight that it would just push him out.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, and honestly, I look back and as much as I value our time together and everything that relationship taught me, I still say I back up that was my body telling me this isn't what we want. This isn't what I don't feel safe. He's not taking our pleasure into consideration.
Right, right.
We deserve better than this. And I look back and I see my body for what it was telling me. But at the time, I would get very frustrated. I'd be like, no, we're just going to keep doing it. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I had seen on Instagram, Lara Parker, again, she was talking about her dilator work with her pelvic floor physical therapy. And granted, in my mind, she had this like long, excruciating endometriosis journey, and I didn't know if we had the same kind of pain or issues. But there was some part of my subconscious that was like, that's important. You should talk to your doctor about that. So I did. I asked my primary. I was like, I'm getting to a point where I'm going to the bathroom all the time. You guys continuously tell me I don't have UTIs. I'm having pelvic spasms. My body is deciding just to not be open for business when I want to be open for business. Right. Can I go to pelvic floor physical therapy? And they wrote me a script, which I cannot recommend enough to honestly, everyone who wants to just kind of deepen that relationship with their pelvis. You don't have to have extreme issues. I mean, some people just, when you laugh, you kind of pee, like a lot of people have pelvic floor tension and don't realize it. So I can't recommend that enough. If you want to do that. I think it's a very important.
What does that entail exactly?
Well, okay. So what I ended up doing is I got a script and I went to my pelvic floor physical therapist for the first time. And, she asked me a series of questions. How is my bladder control? How is my bowel control? I mean, all of that is part of the pelvis. How is my bladder health? How often do I go to the bathroom? Am I having sex? Does it hurt while I'm having sex? Does it hurt after I'm having sex? Does it hurt with specifically penetration or just in general with ovulation and arousal? All of these questions, and very important questions that I honestly hadn't thought of before. I was just so confused and just knew something was wrong.
Right.
And she ended up guiding me through, kind of a routine that I would do that I now do every day at home, of stretches that kind of encourage my pelvis to relax and, bear down, and, pelvic drops. And then also every single session there was internal work, which, sounds funny, but yeah, I had my pelvic floor physical therapist essentially finger me for, 20 minutes, but not in any kind of sexual way.
Sure.
She's essentially, you go in like maybe 2 knuckles worth, and she's hitting certain trigger points within the vagina to try to help encourage the rest of the muscles throughout the pelvis to relax, to ease. And I did that with her for, I'm going to say like a year. But about 2 months in, we got to a point where my awareness and my education with it, I was encouraged to get dilators so I could start doing the internal work for myself at home. And I was so intimidated, and because I was like, oh gosh, okay, does that mean I'm like really fucked up? And like, no, it doesn't. It just means that I got to have more tools that I could explore with and learn my body with. And I got them, and I will never forget, because I was still in the relationship at the time. I'll never forget the day that box came to our door, and I opened it, and I was so excited because I had splurged on these like really pretty dilators by Intimate Rose. And because like I was 26, 27 at the time, if I was going to get, medical tools for my vagina, I wanted to make them not scary. I wanted them to still make me, I didn't want to feel not sexual. So I purposely got fun ones that I could try to be excited about. And, as I was opening them, and I'm like, literally, these look like, to a new person in the, pelvic floor physical therapy world, they just look like various size dildos.
Right.
And all of a sudden I feel my ex-boyfriend, but my boyfriend at the time, just like watching me, and he had no idea what was going on. And then I could see the fear, just straight fear in his face, that I had gotten like a bunch of sex toys. And I know that sounds like, why would that scare your boyfriend? If anything, that should be sexy. But like, this is a guy who told me kinky people are scary and sex toys are for ugly people.
What?
So like, it's just like, he doesn't necessarily have the healthiest opinions.
Sure.
Right. So I don't think I was necessarily in the healthiest space to be, supported. And so I just fear coursing through his face. And then I explained that they were dilators for PT. And again, he just got like honestly disgusted. And it broke me.
Yeah.
Like absolutely broke me. I mean, I hate to be so like, I don't want to sound like mean, but like honestly, that was the point where I immediately like I can remember viscerally the just everything in my body dropping and being like, we're gonna be done.
Yeah. Because you're trying to take your health into your own hands. You're trying to this is a step towards like you feeling better. Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's just the point where you're like, this isn't gonna.
Because like I had just started feeling like, okay, maybe there's there's like a way I'm gonna be able to have some control in this. Like I'm gonna be able to not necessarily fix it, but I'll be able to learn it and figure it out in some way. And then to have someone just like completely be disgusted by it was just honestly heartbreaking. And like I remember him like inviting his friends over and him like making sure to hide them in our room. Like honestly, like they weren't even on display, but like he made sure to like hide them in the closet. Not like anyone was gonna go in our room. Right. And like that just like broke me. And like I just kind of lived in that space for honestly too long. Where I was like, okay, like he doesn't want to touch me. I don't know what to do. My body doesn't necessarily want to be having sex. I want to feel sexy. Mentally, I really want to be having sex. But not necessarily with someone who's not going to be considerate. Sure. So I was just lost and confused for a very long time. And I put off that breakup for way too long. But I mean, we all do that when we've been with someone for a long time.
Yeah, it's comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I know we're not here to talk about family. We're here to talk about dating. But I was in the process of walking away from my family at the same time because they couldn't accept my PMDD diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't talked to my family in 2 years. So at the same time, like, I was going through a breakup with my family already. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to, I need to stay here because I need someone. So that was just where I sat for a long time. You know, I was in a relationship that didn't treat me the way I deserved to be treated, never even considered my pleasure. But technically I didn't have to say I was alone. So I guess that was okay. I guess that was better at the time for me, but no, it wasn't. So eventually I'm really glad I exited that relationship. Because it's funny, my PT and my dilator work actually got easier at that point. Like to almost not have to hold his opinion of what I was going through anymore made everything so much easier.
Absolutely.
And that was like, we broke up like a year ago at this point. And I'm recently trying to start figuring out how to introduce this cocktail of sorts of diagnoses that I carry with me. Because the thing is like, you never want to like dump all your baggage on someone when you first meet someone or like first connect. But at the same time, like all of this stuff is so impactful to who I am on a daily basis. I mean, my mood and like I literally plan my whole schedule around my cycle. So I mean, I can't imagine getting to know someone without explaining like the 4 cycles, the 4 phases of my cycle, or without explaining my dilator work. So it's been very interesting trying to get to know new people. I've kind of been like on the dating apps thinking of these as like hypothetical conversations where I can just kind of practice introducing myself and who I am. And it's very interesting the kind of responses you can get.
Interesting. Like how so?
My favorite one, because, you know, as you mentioned, like I have posted about my dilators. I have posted pictures about my dilators, and I also post pictures of myself without pants. So I know I set a tone that I'm a sexual being, and here are these phallic shaped symbols, I'm posting pictures with. Men love to, their first response is to try to tell me which color dilator their size of their penis is.
Oh my.
Like literally every single guy. I swear to God. They're like, "Oh, I'm like the blue one. I'm like in between the blue and the purple." Like, I don't give a shit. Like, if that's your response, you're not understanding what I'm saying, that these don't have anything to do with my actual, because the thing is, they're tools. It doesn't mean I can't have penetrative sex. I can. And I value penetrative sex, but I don't think it needs to happen every time. I think there can be times where there's pleasure focused specifically on me, or there's time specifically focused on my partner. And it doesn't have to be all about penetration. Because as, I've said on my Instagram, I have days where penetration is a green light. And then I have days where it's really not. Right. And that's something that I need someone to be okay with. And not only okay with, I want to find someone who's enthusiastic about it. And like doesn't see it as like a roadblock, but if almost sees it like, okay, let's get creative.
There's like I said, it's a buffet. There's so many things you can do.
There are so many things you can freaking do. And so to like have gone from that last relationship I was in where someone was just so scared to explore their sexuality, I'm really intrigued to see what this next chapter of my life ends up being like. Because I grew up in a very conservative city with, conservative parents, and unknowing, I had sexual assault trauma my whole life. And I feel like everyone female grows up with this innate sense of shame when it comes to owning and being sexual. And I'm just now at that point where I want to be like, no, there's nothing wrong with me wanting to explore. Mm-hmm. Like, let's have some freaking fun. And like, I don't mean that in like a slutty way. Like, I want to be safe, of course, obviously. But I want to see what experiences might come if I open myself up and be honest about who I am, what I need, what turns me on, and see what someone might do with that. I'm excited. But at the same time, I'm also very scared because it's not necessarily easy to tell people that. And like, I've had to take breaks from the dating apps because it's like, I just can't tell people over and over and over again about my diagnoses and like hope that they like don't say something that fucks with my head. Like, I had a guy that's like literally gave me shit. He was like, so you've been single in the pandemic and you have this sexually positive Instagram, but like, have you really been like having sex since your last relationship? Do you even like, can you talk about that? Like, who are you to even talk about sex? And I was like, excuse you. And like, I literally like deleted my Hinge account for like a week. Cause I was like, it really gave me an imposter syndrome. Cause at that point, I really hadn't been sexual for like a year. And I was like, oh my God, what if he's right? What if I can't talk about being sexual because I haven't had penetration in a year? And it's like,
yeah, that's stupid.
And it's like, and then like when I put it into that sentence with that verbiage, and it's like, oh my God, no, that's such bullshit. Like, no, I have sex all the time, even if it's just with myself. Like, I'm a sexy bitch and I have sex all the time. So fuck that guy. So there's that.
It sounds challenging.
It is a bit. And the thing is, it's like, I'm still navigating how to live and cope with these things. So it's going to be something that in any kind of relationship, and not even just dating, that I'm going to have to be transparent about. And I'm going to, or else it's just going to set an expectation that I don't want to have to act for. And telling the people in my life about my diagnoses and like letting them know that this is very much something that I have to adjust around.
Right.
Creates a safer space for me to be who I am.
Absolutely, which is the most important thing.
Yeah. And so just going forward and like trying to do that and like knowing that there's no shame, and if someone can't handle that, that's because they can't handle that. And that doesn't mean that I'm not, that doesn't mean that I'm too much. That just means that they're like, they can't handle me. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. If anything, Absolutely. It saves me time. Because I remember I didn't want to go on the dating apps. I was like, how am I gonna talk about how, like, I can't go on a date and act like this stuff isn't very much part of who I am. But I also don't want to go on a date and immediately start talking about sex. You know? So I was very scared to even dip my toes into these kinds of conversations. But once I realized that, if anything, it actually does me a favor to be transparent, because then it weeds out the people who might not have the skills that I need to be part of my life. And that's okay.
I think that's true in dating in general. Yeah, like just let your flag fly, and people will respond negatively or positively, and you'll have your answer.
Exactly, because the thing is, it's like, this stuff is stuff I'm going to have to live with either way.
Right.
So if you want to be my future possible husband, or, you know, even the person who I end up having sex with for the next couple of days, you know, I'm like, you're going to have to just, I want you to feel comfortable in my life. I'm not going to adjust around you, because I'm already adjusting for me to make sure I'm comfortable, because I have to be, or else things get very messy. So if you don't fit, you don't fit. And that's okay.
Yeah. And it has to be. I mean, you're like, I always say that I love my partner, but I love me more.
Yeah. And that's so important. That's such an important thing, because in that relationship that I was in for so long, when I was still going through finding all of my diagnoses, I still continuously put our relationship first before my health.
Right.
And because he was, again, I really don't want to make anyone sound bad, but he was he dealt with a lot of shame, and I don't think he knew how to handle it or control it in a way. So to the point where, like, when I got my diagnoses, he wanted to lie to his family about them. He hid them, when I had to when I wasn't up to going to something like a social event for his life, he would lie and say, I just, I had other plans, when really it was like, no, I'm sick and I'm staying home.
Yeah.
And I didn't deserve that.
Yeah, that's no way to live.
No. And like, I should have. No one deserves that. Yeah.
No, it's not. It sounds like, I mean, those things can coexist, right? Somebody can be a nice guy and a good person, but
Have work to do.
Yeah, have work to do and not be the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about before we got off was to talk about the different phases. You said there are 4 different parts of a cycle.
Oh, yes. And it's so important. I feel like
everybody should know this.
Everyone should know this. It doesn't matter if you have PMDD or endometriosis or if you're a male or a woman or non-binary. This is so important just to understand how the females in your life function, because we've lived in such a patriarchal society, and men's hormones are different. They are the same. They're relatively level every day. They show up the same every day, and that's how our society was built, around men's comfort. Yay. Good for them. I'm so happy they're comfy. But the thing is, women are not like that.
Yeah.
Women are literally, we fluctuate, we flow. I mean, it's not just coincidence that we are, associated with the ocean and the moon,
Right.
like we flow. That is what women do. We are divine. And we change, and we mimic nature in our hormones. Like, we have seasons. There's 4 seasons, and there's 4 phases of our cycle. There's, the phases of the moon, they go in a month. Our cycle goes in a month. It's so beautiful, first off, that I can't believe that we haven't honored it more in our culture. It makes me sad, and I hope that there's room for change in that in the future. But so first, there's first phase is menstruation, and I believe we all know what menstruation. We're all familiar with menstruation mostly. It's the lovely time of our month that's our period. Our bodies kind of realized, okay, we're not having a baby, we're shedding a lining. Because something I want to make sure I say, actually, before I go into any of this is, 2021. Yes, we are here. We made it. But our hormones, biologically, they still work in almost a cave woman-like thinking pattern. It's really survival based. And it's so embedded in our systems that we don't even realize it's happening. But it is still so biological that our mission, and I mean, I don't even feel like it's actually our mission, but biologically, our hormones believe it is our mission to find someone to procreate with and make a baby and then be safe. So when you boil that down and you realize that that is entirely reflected within our hormone cycle, it makes a lot of sense, because we have our menstruation where we bleed. We haven't had a baby. Our progesterone's dropped, and our estrogen is just starting to come back in. Our menstruation is known as our new start, our clean slate.
Right.
And, you can kind of set new goals for the month in a way. Generally, people will feel tired but clear, energized but needing rest. It's kind of this in-between phase for us. And then we kind of lead into our second phase. And generally, if everyone's cycle is different in length and it's all unique, but if we really want to be standard here, we think about it in 4 weeks. So week 1 is menstruation. And then we go into week 2, which is follicular phase. And I always call this flirty follicular because to me, it's my best phase. And it's where if we were a cave woman, this would be our time where we would be getting to know people and and we would be observing and trying to find the partner that we are going to try to procreate with. We are going to be trying to pamper ourselves and become our best selves. So by the time we're ovulating, like, we are our sexiest self. So like follicular phase is like this lead up to like trying to feel sexy.
Okay.
And I love the follicular phase because to me it's when I'm flirty, I'm funny, everything feels kind of free. Like all of that clean slate that you got after your menstruation, you finally get to kind of work with it. And your estrogen is building, and all of those like sex hormones are kind of building, and they're kind of like encouraging you to put yourself out there and to be, kind of peacock in a way, to get attention and to get to know possible suitors that might be the right hormonal match to procreate with, and there's so many factors into these things that our hormones kind of take into consideration when we're getting to know people during these phases. Like when we're in our follicular phase and we're like getting to know a new partner, we're taking in their smell, we're taking in their the timbre of their voice, their height, their possible ability to keep us safe in the future, us and our potential
offspring
and our potential babies, if they're going to be able to keep us safe, all of these things, our body is continuously calculating when we get to know someone in this phase. And then once, then we move into phase 3, week 3, ovulation. And our estrogen is at its absolute peak. And estrogen is that it really is the sex hormone. I always say estrogen is the sex hormone. Progesterone is the let's stay in place hormone. Like, let's just it's lethargic for me personally.
Sure.
But estrogen is that sex hormone. It's fire. It's it just fuels you. So once you're in week 3 and you're ovulating, ideally, not ideally, but generally, your libido is skyrocketing. You feel sexy. I mean, honestly, I plan most of my, like I said, I plan my schedule around my month. And anytime I'm going to be doing like a photo shoot or filming or trying to put myself in any kind of situation where I'm going to be kind of needing to be super confident, I schedule that around follicular moving into ovulation on purpose, because I know that's when I'm like bomb and I'm feeling myself. That's I'm giving off all of those vibes that makes everyone else know that I like myself and they like me. And because I know that I don't stay in that mode. So I like to, since I know that I have that strength at that point in my cycle, why not use it? So like if I'm going to schedule a date, I like to schedule it around follicular and ovulation, because even the hormones that you're giving off, it's not just the stuff that goes on within, like the actual energy and chemicals that you're giving off make the other people around you respond differently. It's just so fascinating to me. I mean, the fact that like our noses actually work differently between like when we get into ovulation and our estrogen peaks, and like the way we break down smell of a potential partner is just mind-boggling to me. Because when we're ovulating, we have these like it's almost like superpowers.
And that's incredible. One of my favorite things about your account is that when you post pictures, you post what phase you're in currently and the phase that you're in when you post the picture.
Yeah. And like one of the like most fascinating things I've ever read that like has literally made me change how I think about when I meet a man, because I'm straight and that's who I like to date.
Sure.
is when we're in that follicular ovulation phase where the estrogen is really dominant, we take in smell of our potential partners and we assess it. And what we're trying to do on a biological level, and like we don't do this consciously whatsoever. Our bodies are completely doing this without us knowing. And our bodies know our immune system. And we know what our immune system is capable of. So when we take in the smell of this new person that we might make a baby with, our brain takes it in and it assesses their smell and breaks down if they have an immune system like ours or if they have an immune system that is opposite. And mind-boggling. And when, right? And our brains immediately are drawn more, and like we have a stronger attraction to people who have a smell that tells us that their immune system is opposite of ours. Because if we were to procreate with someone who has an immune system that has strengths where ours has weaknesses, our babies have the most potential to live longer.
This makes so much sense, actually.
Yep.
My boyfriend and I were talking a few weeks ago. I was talking about like how fucking hot I think that Gal Gadot is. I was like, I'm straight, but like,
yep,
that is like the most beautiful woman in the world. And he was like, I don't see it. And like the women that he's into we kind of tease him because he likes horsey women.
Okay. Okay.
And I mean, which, you know, my nose is unique. He's like, you have long flowing mane and like the pretty green eyes and like the like, you know,
you're
kind of
beautiful.
Snout, you know, yeah, sure. but yeah. And I was like, Gal Gadot, and he's like, yeah, like she just doesn't do it for me. And then he told me, he was like, you know, I read somewhere and pretty much just said exactly what it is, that you'll be attracted to people that you would genetically be a good match with for your offspring.
Yeah.
And so he's like, maybe Gal Gadot, like, and I aren't the right fit.
Yeah. So like the fact that like we can meet someone during that time, and if their smell, I mean, I'm not saying that they'll necessarily like smell bad, but I've actually noticed this with meeting new people. Now that I know this, we'll almost have an adverse reaction to their smell. Like we won't be turned on. We won't want to have sexy time with someone who smells like that.
Huh.
And it's just to keep us from procreating with someone who would possibly cause us to have a weaker offspring.
Bodies are so weird.
Right? Like it knows so much, you know, and instead consciously we're just like, I'm not that into him, you know, but like there's so much to it. And we didn't even know. So like that's what's happening during ovulation. You know, the estrogen is peaking. We're sexy. Generally, our sex drives are through the roof. Some people with PMDD will actually have a response at this point in the later week of ovulation. I personally do pretty often, just because of that dramatic dip at that point of the estrogen. Because at that point, we don't need estrogen anymore. At that point, in this ideal world where our biology thinks every month things are going great, we just got knocked up and we don't need to be sexy anymore. Now we need to be safe. Now we need to protect this possible being. So the estrogen just goes, okay, bye. And like says, I'll see you next month. And that's where my brain goes, oh, please don't go.
Oh my God.
But, and then we move into week 4, the luteal phase. And this is generally a time of, it's actually really interesting. I read somewhere, and I can't remember where, but that's actually the time where hormonally we are the most like men.
And this is right before the period.
Yeah, right before our periods, right when we're in our luteal phase, which is actually when men also like to tell us that we are being very hormonal.
Oh, imagine that.
You know, when we're starting to speak our mind and be assertive and like say what's bothering us. like the way like any man would be commended for in a room.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we're most like them. And they like to say we're being hormonal and sensitive.
Oh,
Very interesting. I just think that's very, very ironic.
yes.
Yeah. But at this phase, we're leading into either a period or more ideally, our body is thinking we have a baby. And we're going to be able to create a nice little space in our nice little womb and everything's going to be fine. So the progesterone generally will encourage us to go slower, take a lot more rest, stock up on food. Before period cravings are not just cravings. Like that is your brain saying like, if I have a baby in my belly right now, we need more fuel.
What I'm getting from this conversation is I really hate how my body dictates so much of how I feel.
Yes. It's honestly, it's so annoying because like I don't like to say I'm predictable, but it's almost to say like there is always this factor that I can kind of say, oh, this is happening. And this is probably a big reason why I'm handling things the way I'm handling things.
Right.
But once you realize that, like, that also gives you a lot of superpowers throughout the month. When you know you have certain times that are good for rest and you have certain times that are good for adventure. It's interesting, but we were never given that kind of clues in our culture growing up. We were always told, show up the same every day. And if you fluctuate, you're fucking nuts.
Yeah.
When it's really not true. Everyone fluctuates. It's so interesting. And I mean, I have so many times where I talk to myself and I try to tell my brain, like, we don't need to do any of this. I don't want to have a baby right now. You know? But personally, I'm naturally cycling at the moment without any birth control. I've just found that's the best for me with my endometriosis and PMDD. It's kind of a clusterfuck of trying to figure out what the best treatment is.
Yeah.
But when you're naturally cycling, these hormones aren't suppressed. This is straight up the cave woman cycle, how you would live if you were living like a cave woman. And I love to tell my body all the time, like, do you realize, like, I don't want to have a baby right now. We don't need to do this. Like, we can chill.
Yeah. Yeah. Falling on deaf ears.
Yeah. But like, nope. Like, it wants to still do the things, you know? And it's like, it's so funny. Like, every month when I realize I'm like, oh, I think I kind of like someone. And then I'm like, oh no, I'm just ovulating. You know, because then like then I don't like them once my period comes. I'm like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
Like I just wanted to have sex. Damn.
That is such an interesting. It's so interesting how these different diagnoses that you have all kind of play into each other.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. And I almost want to apologize because I'm still in a phase of my journey where I'm still trying to figure out how to explain how they all kind of interact with one another.
Oh, no, you don't need to apologize. I think it makes complete sense. I mean, just having an overview of, you know, what each thing is like and how they've like impacted your life. I feel like it's wow. Yeah. I sending love to you because you know, I'm just dealing with the PMDD. I'm just dealing with the PMD.
It's a lot of
you know, and it's fucking rough. So
yeah. Well, I mean, and if you don't mind, can I ask you, like, how are you doing with it? Like, what have you found are like your best coping mechanisms? Like, what patterns have you found with it? Because I love talking to other people with PMDD because it's unique for everyone. So you know, especially since I've taken this new role on with IAPMD, I would really love to just hear a little bit about like how you're coping and how you're feeling about your PMDD.
Yeah, so it was a very weird thing because I just kind of about 2 years ago, maybe it was like right after I got back from Ireland, in 2019, I just started noticing like my mood shift, and then it felt like again the second that my period started, it was a snake shedding its skin, and I was a new person, totally different. And I lived with this for a while, and my partner, bless his heart, noticed these differences, and dealt with them, would talk through when I was oversensitive, would talk through it with me.
That's so good.
I would talk with my friends, and I'm still kind of figuring out that, because even though I feel really secure in my relationship, I have a lot of kind of friendship baggage that makes me worried that I'm going to drive my friends away. So whenever I do get snippy, whenever I get like snippy or too sensitive, a couple weekends ago I was with some friends and I started crying.
It happens.
And I apologized the next day, and then I was like, you know what, Rachel, like, you're going to start your period in about a week.
Yeah. And honestly, if those friends love you and know you, they're fine with it.
Yeah, they were like, oh, I've done so much worse, and I was like, okay, but yeah, so I am on birth control. I recently switched to a different birth control, and I am on SSRIs, and I recently, like, breaking news, just this week, got ADHD medication.
Okay, I've heard of people with PMDD and ADHD. It's a cocktail as well.
I grew up with OCD and ADHD, and I thought that I had kind of grown out of them. No, not the case. They just have taken different forms, and the pandemic has kind of made those new forms emerge. So yeah, I'm on a bunch of different medications. I'm kind of playing around to see like what birth control is going to interact with this SSRI this way.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of in this like playing around phase. And I really should be like keeping a journal too, based on which phase I am in. I should use the Clue app more. Is there another app that you would recommend other than the Clue app?
I use Flow.
Okay.
I use Flow.
Yeah, I've heard of that one as well.
It's technically a pregnancy, it markets itself as like if you're trying to get pregnant, like it lets you know when you're most ovulating, but like it tells you your cycle generally, and I feel it picks up patterns pretty well. So, and the thing I like about it is it asks you about your symptoms every day. So it helps you log that without meaning to.
Right. Yeah, Clue does that too. It just asks about like your skin, your mood.
Yeah. Also specifically for women with PMDD, there's Me V, like verse, but it's just V. Me V PMDD.
Okay.
And that is it's a specifically tracking app for it. It goes a little more in depth for those people with symptoms that PMDD really gets into. Like it'll ask you if you're suicidal every single day. It's important.
Wow.
And the thing I love about this app is that it'll track these and it'll chart them for you, and you can show them to your doctor. Okay. So that is right now, just so I can like make sure I get this in, because I feel like this is a very important little soundbite to have in here. One of the best ways to be diagnosed with PMDD is to track your symptoms for 3 months. That's one of the official ways that they have you get diagnosed. And to me, I struggled with tracking my symptoms because sometimes my symptoms got in my fucking head and I just couldn't do anything. So the fact that app would do that chart for me was so helpful when I was really in that dark space and needing that diagnosis. So I just really want to mention that that's a really great app.
Okay. Yeah. I guess, are there any other resources that you want to share?
Yes. But real quick, I also want to just say, I really commend you for, having the strength to keep trying different treatments and for keep showing up every day and like trying to figure out how you feel.
Yeah.
Proud of you. I'm really glad that you're on that journey. Like I'm on that journey as well. I know it's not easy. So hugs.
Yeah, definite hugs. I mean, but what other option do you have, right?
I do SSRIs, but I've gone back and forth between luteal dosing or just complete, just the same dose all month long.
Oh, okay.
Like a lot of people with PMDD will either only take their SSRIs from like ovulation till their period, or I personally microdose my SSRI from my period till ovulation.
Interesting.
And then ovulation till your period, you kick it up a notch. So like I've messed around with all of that and I'm still figuring out what's best for me. I've had months where luteal dosing worked, and I've had months where I think it's like I've been convinced I should change my plan. So it's an ever-flowing thing, and I think it's a lifelong thing, and I think credit should be given where credit is due, because this is hard and it requires resilience.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure.
Yeah. But resources. Let me pull up my little notepad, because this is the one thing I did write down. First, I wanted to say like my top 3 favorite Instagram accounts are Lara Parker. She's, like I said, she's the BuzzFeed sex editor. And she also lives with endometriosis, PMDD, and pelvic floor dysfunction. And she's just a hero. I love her. And then one of my favorite accounts for pelvic floor tension and just in general pelvic floor physical therapy. And this is, again, if you're even remotely curious, like you don't have to have any of these diagnoses to learn from this account. The Pelvic Health Ladies. Okay. I think they are wonderful. And they really teach you quite a bit. And then another account that I feel she really covers a lot. She's been around for a little bit. The V Hive.
Awesome.
And I just know that she's had her own chronic pelvic journey, and it's kind of helped her kind of start this brand where she's having conversations, and I've listened to it before and just been like, oh my God, and had realizations, and it's a really good podcast and Instagram account. And then I will always and forever tell anyone, even remotely curious or maybe concerned that they might have PMDD, or if anyone in their life has PMDD, IAPMD Global is the best global organization for PMDD for spouses, partners, family members, doctors, and patients. They have amazing resources. They have 24/7 peer support. They have, stuff you can print out and bring to your doctor. They have a doctor directory, a global doctor directory for, the best doctors in the area for PMDD. Oh, wow. That they're continuously trying to grow. Because it's still, doctors that really know how to deal with PMDD is still, up and coming. So the more recommendations they get, the more that directory is going to get filled. And it's just such a community that I think is really important. And I think people with PMDD should all be there. And April is going to be PMDD Awareness Month, and that's right around the corner. And it is a super fun time to not feel alone in a very isolating illness. So very excited, and I think they are a wonderful organization, and I'm honored to even be a cog in the machine. And then just 2 books / authors that I think are really wonderful. The book that really made my brain blow up about the cycles of the phases of the cycle and our hormones is How the Pill Changes Everything by Sarah E. Hill. I just want to preface with, it is not a anti-birth control book. It is just a educational book in general about the effects of birth control.
Because it does change things.
It does change things. For some people, for the better. For some people, for the worse. It's important. And it was so trendy in like the women's liberation movement that now we're finally getting to that point where it's like, okay, now we need to actually ask what happens after we're on it for so long. Because like I understand wanting to take that that power and that ownership. I was on birth control for a very long time. I think it's very important for a lot of people's medical conditions. It is important. But we're finally at a point where people have been on it long enough that we are learning more. And I think it is important to be asking these questions because, you know, I just remember being in high school and being like, well, being on birth control is cool, so I should do it. You know, when it's like, really, no, like you are altering your hormones and you need to know what's gonna happen. You need to know what you're signing up for. It's not good or bad, but it is a choice. You know? So, and Sarah E. Hill in general is just an amazing author, and she just has so much wisdom to share about hormonal health. I love her. And then I'm currently reading She Comes First by Ian Kerner.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think it's mind-blowing right now. I love what I'm learning. I find, even though I really want to be in this sexually positive community, I have a lot of learned patterns I still have to unlearn. A lot of my sexual experience and sexual patterns I feel are very performative and male focused.
Sure.
Just because of the generation we grew up in. So it's like, even though I definitely want to be in this space and I want to have these conversations, like I'm still learning. And there's so much about my own pleasure I'm still figuring out. So that book is just, I love it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm not familiar with How the Pill Changes Everything, but I'm definitely familiar with She Comes First.
Yeah. No, and that's what I got for you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It has been.
I hope I made sense.
No, you made plenty of sense.
Okay.
You were perfect.
Okay, cool. I'm so happy we got to talk. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah,
really.
I'm super, super excited to air this too. I know a ton of people are going to want to listen to it.
Oof.
So, well, thank you, Allison, and everyone. This has been Wine Dine in 69. I'm your host, Rachel Dalton, here with my friend from college and guest, Allison.
Thank you.
Follow her at My Peculiar Pelvis on Instagram, and let's keep talking.